Welcome to another episode of Conduct Detrimental. Dan Lust, Mike Lawson. Mike, we have been speaking to each other for, I don't know, maybe like 3 years now. Finally get to meet in person. How's it feel, Mike?
You are taller in person.
Okay, let's address the elephant in the room. Mike, you are 6'3", okay? I'm not a short individual. I'd say I'm an average height. I'm like 5'10" and change. Mike, I did not perceive you. We've been talking on Zoom for legitimately 3 years. I did not think you would be 6'3".
Yeah, I mean, when you only see from the shoulder up, I guess you can't really tell how tall somebody is. If you see me with photos of my friends, I have many friends that are like 6'5" plus. So I guess it would also make me look shorter.
Yeah, we follow each other on Instagram. I've seen you in context. I never viewed you as being 6'3". Now, one of our other Conduct Detrimental team members, Conlan Farrell, he kind of appears to me to be a tall individual. Now, another one, Brendan Duggan, low key, he's a big man. What is Duggan, like 6'7", 6'6"?
I think he's 6'6". Yeah, he's a big guy.
Yeah, what's going on here? What's in the waters? Why do we have all these tall people? Like, just relax. But anyway, Mike, it was you were in Suffolk County today. Drove all the way down from Albany, and I'm happy you stopped by the office. It was great to see you. It's been a long time in the making. We kept missing each other at the conduct event, our Brian Flores panel, that class action panel. Finally, we made it happen.
That's right. Yeah, there were a lot of close calls that we just missed each other. But yeah, I was down there for a court appearance, and I was just driving right by where your office was, so it was perfect. So I mean, we've been working together for almost 3 years now, and it was finally good to meet you in person.
It definitely was. So Mike, I told you offline, I say it on the air. The highlight of my day was seeing you in person and realizing that you were 7'5", give or take, or so. So, okay, let's do this. We got a really fun episode today. So for those that don't know, I am teaching at New York Law School and low-key. I have not posted this online, but for our podcast people, I am teaching at Fordham Law School on the weekends. It is a long story. I'm doing a lot of teaching. I'm doing a lot of Deshaun Watson, a lot of NIL, a lot of Washington Commanders, a lot of Kyrie Irving. And I'm like, you know what? Let's mix it up this week. Let's not talk about any topics that we talk about. Let's do a completely brand new episode of topics that we never, ever talk about. So we have lined up, some really fascinating topics today. We're going to talk about a breach of a marketing contract with Odell Beckham Jr. Mike, you and I are going to handle that. And then we have a number of guests today, different specialties. So first, we're going to have a conversation around the law surrounding sports memorabilia. Two guests for that topic. It's Ezra Levine, the CEO of Collectable. That's a company that deals in the buying, selling, and trading of shares in iconic and rare collectibles. Head to collectable.com. A really fascinating site. I have a bunch of friends that are investors in the space, users of the space. So I got connected with Ezra, really good dude, very knowledgeable in that area. And the other guest for that particular topic, a new friend of ours, Paul Lesko. He's an attorney that deals in the sports trading card space. Very apropos for this particular conversation. So we're going to talk a little bit about an autograph lawsuit in the upper deck sphere, the Panini Breakers saga. We're going to talk a little bit of Aaron Judge home run ball. Yes, that Aaron Judge home run ball that no one has heard about since it happened. Mike, maybe near and dear to your heart as a Yankees fan. And then the Tom Brady ball, that saga, maybe a little bit of revisiting of that saga ball could have happened. And then last but not least, we have a conversation around the sports crypto space. And that's going to be with Mike DiLiello and Duncan Hubbard, two law students, two contributors to Conduct Detrimental, and a topic that, Mike, I don't think we've ever spoke about on Conduct Detrimental. You ready for this one? Eminent domain. An eminent domain saga got passed along to us about Niagara University. And we figured, you know what? It's time to cover eminent domain, Mike. It's been about 3 years on this podcast. Let's cover eminent domain. We have no discrimination towards any topics whatsoever. All things sports and law. Mike, we got a lot of topics. What do you think? What do you think about this menu we've laid out?
Yeah, I think it's a unique layout too, because these are a lot of different areas that we haven't really touched on, especially with the collectibles. I mean, when the pandemic hit, in terms of like just physical trading cards too, that blew up, and then now we see, we're talking about the online collectibles too and the digital collectibles. So I think it's a great layout for some unique topics, and we're going to hit on our close to home with a breach of contract case with OBJ. But that just goes to show the diversity that we have in this show. Anything that crosses over into the sports law realm. And I think that's kudos to the same thing that happens with Themis, our sponsor, our partner here, Themis Bar Prep. They will take you through every single topic that you need to get prepared for the bar exam. Head over to themisbar.com/con detrimental. I think there's a special deal, right, Dan? There's $1,000 off right now.
There's always deals, but there's a special deal. You get extra money off if you use our promo code conduct. Again, I had a couple students reach out to me after one of our last ad reads, and I mean it. I will hook you up directly with the people at Themis to get that special promo code. We've been partners with Themis for, I think, just about a year now. We've helped grow their brand, and likewise, they've helped grow the Conduct brand, so we love to see it. So, Mike, before we get started, before we get into this fun palette we've laid out, before we get into OBJ, our first topic, Mike, I didn't hear congratulations from you.
Congratulations are in order.
Do you know what you're congratulating me for?
No.
Yours truly, the number 2 Dan on the show. We'll give Dan Wallach the number 1 seed. He was here first. Yours truly, Dan number 2, is speaking at Harvard Law School in person in Cambridge.
I did see that.
In Cambridge. How about that? How
do you feel about that? When is that?
That is in about 2 weeks. 2 weeks from today, on November 29th, I'm heading down to Cambridge for the day, and I will be there, and I will be in and out very quickly. But listen, this is a thank you. The reason we brought it up, Themis has helped grow our show tremendously. And I do want to say, right, our platform for sports law has grown tremendously. Mike has, by the time people hear this, you'll have a publication in Joe Pompliano's Sports Business Newsletter. We're doing Harvard Law School. We're going all over the place. We're going up and down. We're reaching a brand new audience. So I don't know, Mike, it feels really cool. We're speaking about NIL at Harvard. We're talking about the Commanders. But I just we had a vision for this show, I don't know, whenever Dan and I linked up about 2.5 years ago at this point, and we thought we could be the hub of sports and law. And I think, by golly, Mike, I think we've done it. I think we're right at the center of the sports law universe.
Absolutely. And now you get to go to Cambridge in the middle of the winter.
I do, and it's not billable. So I'm just going to drive out there. Mike, your trip down to our lovely part of downstate was certainly a billable avenue, and mine is not. Mine is not a billable event. So got to make up those billable hours somehow. That's what we do. Okay, Mike, let us get into a fun breach of contract suit with Odell Beckham Jr. So Odell Beckham, I have a feeling, is going to come up twice over the course of this podcast when we talk about some sports crypto. But lay us out why we are talking about Odell Beckham and Nike.
Let's go back about 5 years. OBJ was pretty much the face of the NFL. Everybody is quite aware of the one-handed catch that OBJ made when he was on the Giants, and then more recently, he was on the LA Rams. He went down with an injury in the playoffs, but the LA Rams did ultimately go on to win the Super Bowl. But why he is up in the news today and this week is he has filed a $20 million lawsuit against his brand endorser, Nike. And, at the time that he signed this deal back in 2017, he already was a Nike athlete. He had a 3-year deal when he was originally with the Giants. And then he re-signed a 5-year deal with extensions, could actually go to be an 8-year deal with the extension clauses. And it was the most lucrative shoe deal in NFL history at the time. With all of the bonuses and the incentives met, it would be around $48 million over that 8-year span. So unbelievable contract that OBJ signed. And with that, he became a brand icon for Nike, which again, I think was the first of the NFL, first brand icon for the NFL. And he became multifaceted in his approach with social media and his on the field performances. And he, everything that he was doing was donning the Nike swoosh and the Nike logo. Now, he has filed this lawsuit. It's a breach of contract case, breach of contract, and then breach of the covenant of good faith and fair dealings as well, all kind of wrapped in the breach of contract here. OBJ is alleging that Nike terminated. So the deal terminated in June of this year, June of 2022. It was a 5-year deal. That was the 5-year ending point, and there were clauses that extended for the next 3 years. Now, OBJ is alleging that Nike has intentionally depressed the sales, which was a part of that clause to extend the contract. It was a guaranteed extension if these certain sales were met. Now, this was all of the products that had OBJ's name, which were royalty deemed products. If a certain amount of sales, were netted for OBJ products, then they would automatically extend the contract for year 6, 7, and 8. Now, Nike said that those sales actually didn't occur, so then they terminate the agreement. OBJ files this suit saying that, Nike acted in bad faith because they were depressing the sales intentionally by not creating these cross-market products for OBJ, which didn't include, obviously if he's an NFL athlete, that wouldn't just include cleats and gloves and maybe uniforms and things like that, but also some cross-product apparel, such as just, running, shorts and running shirts and things like that. He's also claiming that Nike was citing him for violations of the footwear and the gloves that he was wearing. However, in the lawsuit, he actually put pictures of the alleged violation. I'm putting that in quotes. And they were alleging that he was covering up the Nike logo or not wearing proper, Nike attire on the field. But the pictures clearly show that he was wearing the Nike. And he claims that Nike also failed to give him new cleats when he went to the Rams, so he took it upon himself to create custom cleats. So long-winded, a lot of allegations, big lawsuit here, $20 million in damages. But I think what's also interesting is amongst all of this, another remedy that he's seeking is reformation. He's looking to reform the contract with Nike. He has it's almost like he has no ill will. He just wants to bring the contract back. He wants to maintain this contract and keep the extensions going.
Couple things, Mike, and I think this is probably pretty relevant to the analysis here. 2014 is Odell's rookie year. He shoots on the scene, wins Rookie of the Year, is a Pro Bowler, 1,300 yards, 12 TDs. Year 2, also a Pro Bowler, 1,450 yards, 13 TDs. Year 3, 1,300 yards, 10 TDs, his third Pro Bowl year. Mike, 2016. When is that contract done? That big contract he does with Nike? What year is that?
So 2017, he actually was going to sign with Adidas, and Adidas made him an offer around $48 million. And Nike, under the original contract, had a right of first refusal. So they matched Adidas's offer in 2017 and signed him for the deal that I just mentioned.
So, listen, Mike, you're falling into my trap here a little bit, right? And I don't know if it's a trap, but we'll set this thing up. First 3 years of Odell's career is not making that much under the Nike deal. Sure, they have the right of first refusal, but 2017, right after he finished the year of 2016, is when he really starts, obviously he's commanding a lot of money from Adidas. Nike wants to sign him, fine. But Mike, I mentioned those first 3 Pro Bowl years. That's when the lucrative Nike contract kicks in. That is coincidentally, I don't know, with basically the downturn of Odell Beckham's career. After those first 3 years, he never makes the Pro Bowl again. He never has more than 6 touchdowns in a year again. He never eclipses 1,100 yards. And it was really all downhill from that point. So, Mike, I guess I can ask you it this way. Do you think that Nike was maybe not as motivated to promote and market him as much as they would had he been, a guy that was getting 1,300 yards, 11, 12 TDs and making Pro Bowls? Maybe it's that simple.
Absolutely. I agree. I think Nike probably saw the downturn in his on-field, success. But granted, he did have some injuries. If we want to give him credit for that, he suffered through some injuries and he didn't play really many full seasons since 2017. But I think in terms of value that OBJ still brought to the company, I don't know. It needs to go to discovery, and you need to see what the true value of what he was bringing in for the products in terms of the extension. But whether or not he was bringing in the amount of money that Nike originally thought he would from his first 3 years to now, yeah, they probably saw a downturn because of his I'm going to say lack of success, even though he won the Super Bowl with the Rams. But I think Nike was probably trying to go to the fine print and see if they can get out of this contract so they don't have 3 more years, $20 million more to OBJ. I
mean, the interesting part is the part you hit on at the end, too, the reformation of the contract. Usually when you sue for breach of contract, this is, 99 times out of 100. You want out of the deal. The two parties hate each other and they want to go separate ways. But let's just talk about it, call a spade, right? Odell Beckham, again, we are midway through the season. Odell doesn't have a team. That's because of the injury he suffered during the Super Bowl. But, sometimes you need that Nike deal. Sometimes a Nike deal, and Mike, we actually have the terms of the contract. That can be a more lucrative contract, your Nike deal, than your on-field deal, as crazy as that sounds. And then obviously, as we're going to talk about a little bit in the crypto sense, there is a lot of reports out there that Odell Beckham actually lost money playing football, at least for the LA Rams, in the short period of time he was there, because of the value of crypto that has since plummeted and the taxes he paid on the original crypto. So yeah, this is why Odell doesn't want to go his separate ways. He kind of needs Nike, right? I would think, for his earnings purposes. Imagine Odell's going to maybe play a couple more years in the league, but certainly need that Nike stock to supplement his earnings.
Yeah, I mean, you see this across many different sports. It's not just the NFL. I mean, look at obviously LeBron has built an empire with his deal with Nike. Kobe was the same way. But in terms of sponsorship deals, I mean, look what Tiger Woods has done with golf. I mean, the majority of Tiger Woods' income was his sponsorship. So when all of the off-course things started happening and Tiger started losing his sponsorship endorsements, that's where he was really getting chipped away. That was his guaranteed money, right? You know, he only won money when he got the purse money for tournaments and things like that. So yeah, these endorsements are kind of solid for these athletes, where it's a guarantee. And you said it perfectly. I mean, OBJ is a free agent right now. He doesn't have a team, so he's got to now negotiate, especially with all of his ailments that he's been going through. He's clearly had some injuries in the last 5 years. A team might not want to take a risk on him, or they are going to chip away at the true value of that contract. It might be a short-term deal. So yeah, he sees this extension as, you know, these last 3 years as guaranteed money.
Yeah, and if we're trying to figure out what's next year, I mean, you know, obviously we're going to follow this thing pretty closely. I would imagine, you know, just again, the optics of a lawsuit, what has probably happened is Odell threatened to sue Nike if they didn't settle with him. I imagine Nike obviously, you know, didn't pony up the settlement, or else we wouldn't be here. So, you know, obviously one option is Nike chooses to settle the case. That's certainly possible. But at this stage, if Nike didn't want to settle, they're obviously not agreeing on the valuation of the case. So if you get to this part, I think Nike's going to, you know, obviously going to lawyer up, and they're going to go ahead with their defense of the case. So it could be filing an answer and issuing a general denial, or it could be, you know, the more aggressive tactic is by filing a motion to dismiss, maybe either a pre-answer motion to dismiss based on maybe some of their contractual defenses. You know, we'll see what they come up with, or they're going to wait a little bit and you know, engage in a little bit of discovery. But yeah, I think it's a case that Nike's going to want to make go away, but it's not, you know, maybe this is good or bad. Obviously, Odell is alleging, you know, the breach of the covenant, a good faith and fair dealing. He's alleging that Nike didn't do enough to support him and kind of like tanked his you know, his product by itself. But I don't know, you know, we talked about Kyrie Irving not so long ago. Like, sometimes athletes kind of, you know, come and go, and sometimes there's going to be the most popular athletes. Sometimes you want to stay away from them. And there was a period of time, you know, where Odell Beckham was, you know, a problematic personality in football, was really a malcontent in Cleveland, forced his way out of there. And really kind of had a bad stigma around him in his last couple of years with the Giants, kind of being a problematic guy. So yeah, I'm sure Nike's going to come up with a defense to say, hey, we do not have to promote you as an elite guy in the sport when you are objectively no longer that type of elite talent. So sometimes it's not a breach of good faith and fair dealing. Sometimes it's just good business, right? You're not going to promote the guy who's not making Pro Bowls the same way you were a guy that was on a track to be a first ballot Hall of Famer at the time they signed him.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think too, in terms of a contractual agreement here, what is interesting is the venue. So this is venued in state court in Oregon, and it's in the county of Multnomah. So obviously Nike is headquartered in Beaverton, Oregon, and you know, that was a contractual, that, you know, that's always in a contract, you know, where if there is an issue that arises under the contract, where it's going to be venued. So obviously this is a contractual agreement where it's more favorable to Nike that they're going to venue it in Oregon, and not even, it's in state court. It's not even federal court. I remember when it first kind of came out, everyone on Twitter was like, where's this? You know, I can't find it on Pacer, and people were kind of hunting, and then they found it was in Oregon. Because this was, I think, originally a TMZ report that found the lawsuit.
Good luck to Odell winning in Oregon.
So Odell I think he lives in LA. I think he lives in California, but the company, so Royalty Only is his entity, and that's based in Florida. And then Nike is based obviously in Oregon. So we'll see here. I mean, definitely settlement is probably the threat that came before this lawsuit, like you said. So I think the next step is some sort of settlement or a motion to dismiss.
So we will keep an eye on that one. It is obviously a very big lawsuit, making a lot of headlines. And look out. By the time this podcast is out, we'll have our feature up in the Joe Pomp newsletter, the Sports Business Hustle. Yeah, certainly keep an eye out for that. Okay. Moving on to the sports memorabilia phase, we talked about early on the podcast, we had Ezra Levine on from Collectable. He's the CEO there. We also have on Paul Lesko. You can find both of them. Both their handles are going to be in our show notes. But for our topic, we're going to talk really about four things. We're going to keep it pretty high level, but we do need to kind of explain to you that these are, in theory, some fundamental lawsuits that are happening or maybe are about to happen in this space. So for those that have not been following it, we're going to talk about the Panini backyard breaks controversy. It seems to be maybe the elements of a potential sweepstakes violation. If anybody's in that space, I know I have some people at my firm that are very much into it. I have one lawyer in particular in my firm that is convinced that the trading card space, the NFT space, and obviously the actual card space might be violative of some sweepstakes particular laws. So some people that are very fascinated in this case have recommended this topic to us. And then we're going to talk about a little bit of these autograph sagas. If people signing cards, baseballs, bats, and then they go to try to get these autographs like authenticated by these authenticators, and they're saying, no, it's not a real signature. So we haven't really seen that many lawsuits on that front. There's been maybe a Dak Prescott situation a couple of years ago, but something's coming out now. I think it involves, we're not exactly sure. We think it involves a Tom Brady autographed card, but it's a lawsuit against Upper Deck Mike Fowler that are all placed in small claims court. So credit to Paul Lesko, who's one of our guests for this topic. He found this thing out, but we think it does speak to the overall industry. And then again, Aaron Judge Ball, and then the quote unquote last Tom Brady ball, which I think Ezra has some really good knowledge in there. So, Mike, yeah, without further ado, let us kick it over to our conversation of all things sports, memorabilia, and trading cards.
So we're going to try something new on Conduct Detrimental this week. We are going to cover some interesting topics, controversies in the sports memorabilia worlds. We have our guests, Ezra Levine and Paul Lesko. So guys, I guess let's start with the one that is probably picking up the most traction in the sports trading card space, maybe an interesting sweepstakes lawsuit that's bound to happen. That is the Panini's Breakers saga. So at least from my vantage point, this appears to be an allegation that was started by some random person on Twitter. And sometimes those random people on Twitter do have good thoughts, but that the odds of Breakers actually getting this amount of high-end cards, be it the triple jersey card, you name it, somehow, some way, they keep ending up on Breakers. So, we have someone, Ezra from the industry, Paul, we have a fellow attorney on here. So I figured we could just open up the floor and maybe, Paul, you can lead us off with what's going on really in that space and maybe some things that you have found yourself in particular in that arena.
Sure. I think, one of the more interesting things that happens with breakers is, and you see a lot of complaints about it, is, hey, how do they keep getting these great hits? How do they keep getting, the one of ones and every other card that's out there? And most times there's, an innocuous explanation in the fact that they're just buying more product than everybody else. But recently there's been some, evidence that's out there that perhaps some of the Panini boxes that are out there have serial numbers. And those serial numbers, depending on what they are, may actually may tip the cards that there is a desirable hit, a case hit that's in there. And what's interesting about the legal issues when it comes to that is, really, is somebody at fault and who's at fault for that? Because if generally consumer fraud claims are all based off of misrepresentations and the party making misrepresentations having more knowledge than others. So, where at in the chain is there potential liability here? Does Panini have liability because they've released the product and somebody can crack the code? Do breakers who auction off these spots in these, do they have liability? Because, if they know about it, do they have liability? If they don't know about it, they have liability. I think it's an interesting topic, and it's something I think will develop over time, and it'll be fun to watch.
So Ezra, let me ask you. From your perspective, running a company like Collectable, it seems like there is at least the appearance of potential impropriety with some of the stuff, right? Obviously, if Panini card is broken live on air, right, in front of backyard breaks, that probably is better for business than if it's broken in our mom's basement and no one's watching, right? You would think that is maybe beneficial. But you have companies like Panini, like Breaks, that maybe have some, I don't want to say financial incentive, but it makes sense in why would one do that, right? We could talk about our sports history. Ezra, you and I both grew up in New York, right? There's all these conspiracy theories that the once upon a time, the NBA draft lottery, that the Knicks draft card was frozen, that the corners were bent. That's how David Stern knew to pick it. I mean, I don't know if we're just kind of sitting here, isn't the optics that it's very, there is potential for potential conflicts for something like this. That's why maybe there is a conspiracy floating out there with respects to Panini and breakers. Aren't there some potential bad optics?
Well, on the topic of the Knicks, if that was true about the 1986 draft or the 85 draft with Ewing, I think the NBA has done a lot to right that wrong. I don't think the Knicks have actually had a draft pick higher than their suggested or projected rank in about 25 years. So
That's
NBA,
fair.
if you're listening to this, I think it's over. I think you've righted the wrong enough here. Yeah, I mean, so I think for people who are not steeped in the world of sports collectibles, it might be helpful just to give a little bit of a high level summary in terms of what is breaking, right? Obviously, if you're in this industry, breaking is very second nature. If you're not familiar with the sports collectibles market, the trading card market, it's not always so intuitive. So breaking is a relatively new phenomenon. It really started, and Paul will probably be more of an expert here, but I would say within the last decade or so, essentially, as the prices of sports cards and boxes and cases of sports cards have escalated, a new industry called breaking has emerged. And the logic here is that if you don't want to shell out what oftentimes can be in the thousands of dollars, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars for a box of cards or for a case of cards, you can buy a slot. Very similar in some regards to gambling, in the sense where you're buying a slot, and for an unproven, uncertain outcome, whatever slot you buy, if the allocations or if your slot hits, for lack of a better term, then you are the rightful owner of whatever cards are pulled within that slot, right? So it's been a really exciting phenomenon. I think it's brought a lot of excitement and a lot of engagement, and in some ways been a really good entry point, just like fractional ownership has, for getting new people into the sports collectibles hobby, getting new collectors into the market who otherwise might have been priced out. Certainly, there are economic incentives across the board, to get these big hits pulled in ways that the most amount of eyeballs can see it. So obviously there are some breakers who've developed quite the robust social media followings, or followings on YouTube, or other platforms like Whatnot, and there's a whole host of other platforms. So yeah, I mean, look, I think certainly there are economic incentives across the board. The sports collectibles market has been for a long time a little bit of an under the radar industry. And it's an industry that has, over the last couple of years, really gotten a lot of publicity. And certainly, I think breaking has been a big part of it. When you see someone who pulls $1 million card off of a slot that might have cost them $1,000, it is tempting for other people to come in and try it. And it's a pretty high margin business for breakers, right? And so, yes, I think the possibility of there being impropriety or there being some sort of scandal certainly exists. The position from Backyard Breaks has been that there is no official relationship between Panini and Backyard Breaks. In fact, they've even gone on record as saying that they do not have a direct Panini representative. They do not have a lot of the same relationships that other large breaking companies, almost surprisingly, have. Right. So I think they're trying to walk back any optics of of a misalignment of incentives. But I think there certainly is evidence here to suggest that it's statistically very difficult for them to have been pulling as many hits as they have been. So I think that's certainly why some of the legal minds and industry minds are following it closely.
I think that's fair, Ezra. And I think as a fellow Knicks fan, like we had the worst record in basketball and we didn't get Zion or Ja. I mean, I'll take RJ, but at some point the NBA is going to throw us back a bone at some point. But Ezra, to that last point you raised, right? Some of the most desirable cards in the space have been pulled live, right? On videos through the Backyard Breaks account. It's the LeBron triple logo man, the Warriors triple logo man, and two very high level Cade Cunningham cards. So yes, in one sense, it is very convenient, very coincidental, but in another sense, right, it is probably good for the business in general for those cards to be pulled in such a public kind of manner. So Paul, as an attorney that follows this area very closely, we kind of joked, right? If the NBA was in the business of running the NBA lottery with all the different controversies over the years, I'm not sure how well the NBA could have rebounded from pretty public controversy with Patrick Ewing, and you go on and so forth. But the NBA, right, has an 82-game schedule. They say in football, right, every Sunday they can reset the news cycle. But a company like Backyard Breaks or Panini, they're in the business of giving those cards out with those certain percentages, right? It could be baseball cards dealing with certain holofoil cards, the black cards, the orange foil, green foil. If there is an allegation that, loaded boxes, right, quote unquote, are being sent over to the breaks, I mean, isn't that at some point an issue of just consumer fraud, Paul? Isn't that kind of the realm that we might be in?
If there are loaded boxes that are being sent, then clearly that would be some type of consumer fraud, because again, the whole option or the whole idea of just even trading cards or boxes of cards is everybody has a chance to pull that card. If it's not true at the beginning, if some are set aside only for certain people, however, consumers believe they all have an equal chance when they don't, that is just, that's a quintessential consumer fraud claim right there. So there's always that risk. And there's always been kind of the rumors or the conspiracy theories of loaded boxes. And, quite often, though, they can be explained away through just sheer numbers, the volume of business that's being done by some breakers. Like Backyard Breaks does a lot of business. And while it looks like they do pull some of the best cards out there, there are a lot of best cards that are out there depending on who there is. So maybe they pulled the best card out of a 2022 product and the third best card out of another product. But the way that everyone looks at those are like, oh my gosh, they're getting all the best cards, when really they're just buying so many. However, if there is any type of loaded boxes that are being sent somewhere, that would definitely be a consumer fraud claim.
So let's hang here for a second on consumer fraud, because at some point the industry, I mean, it's not let's say the most heavily regulated industry in the world. Maybe at some point it will. Maybe that's good. Maybe that's bad. But another area where I think there is some level of intrigue, right? It's the autograph industry. So I guess we talk about pulling cards, but obviously if you get an autograph on that card, it's going to get to another level. So big controversy a couple of years ago with the Dak Prescott stuff. You can Google that if you want to go on your machine. But the authenticity of autographs, obviously that's going to add value to a card if it's done the right way. But if that same card is maybe donned with a fake autograph, maybe that same card is worth even less. So Paul, I guess you seem to be the expert in this. You've unearthed, maybe in our world as lawyers, it's like, oh, it's a small claims case, who cares? But right, it's the question of the legitimacy of the autograph and that aspect of the industry. So Paul, what did you unearth on this maybe fascinating upper deck case?
Sure. And small claims courts, I mean, I just find fascinating because when you're in the trading card world, yes, there are high dollar products that are out there, but there's a lot of products that actually do fall within the small claims world. And if you want to file a case and not need a lawyer, small claims is where you go. So here, what's happened is there is a collector who bought a Tom Brady 2004 autographed card. It's an upper deck card. Bought it, and I think he bought it from eBay in 2015, it looks like. The way that you can get cards to become more valuable is you submit them to an authenticator. The authenticator will then look at the card, will assign a grade to it, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best for the condition. And we'll put the card in a slab, and at that point you can show off. If you have a card that's not graded and then it grades as a 10, you have a great increase in value of that card. And especially it's saying that the card is authentic and there's nothing wrong with it. This collector submitted his Tom Brady autograph card to 2 different authenticators, to PSA and to BGS. I mean, the 2 of the largest authenticators out there. And both of the authenticators rejected the card. They said that they can't authenticate it because of the autograph that's on here. So what's neat about autographed cards is on the back, most companies on there will say the autograph on this card is guaranteed by Upper Deck or guaranteed by Panini, whoever has it. So here's a card that says it's guaranteed. The autograph is guaranteed by Upper Deck, but nobody will authenticate it. Nobody will grade it. So the collector here filed a lawsuit in small claims court against Upper Deck saying, hey, this should be a $5,000 to a $10,000 card. Everybody thinks this autograph is suspect. Give me the value of the card for what it should actually be worth. So it's a fascinating case to watch because, like you mentioned, there are autograph cases that pop up every once in a while, whether an autograph is an auto pen not hand signed, a machine did it like for Dak Prescott, or there's always rumors out there that maybe some athlete isn't signing cards, maybe their mom is, or somebody else is signing the cards that are out there. So it'll be interesting to see if you can, peel back the layers of the authentication process, because a lot of autographs now, while supposed to be witnessed by the companies, they'll just say, okay, the agent authenticated it for us, so that's good enough for us. So it'll be interesting if this case progresses to that far. Is that an issue here? Or there's the other potential problem with the autograph. Did somebody fake the autograph of this card? Is this a fake card? Is there some other issues that are out there? So it'll be neat to see. It's a new lawsuit that's unfiled. Small claims court does move quickly, though. So it's got a January trial date. So we could get a resolution to this one pretty quickly.
There has been a lot of interest, I would say, in player signed cards, right? And in the vintage market, sometimes if a card is autographed by the player, we're dealing with a card right now with a Lou Gehrig signed rookie card, right? If the card is autographed in recent years, you're seeing significant multiples on the realized price if you can confirm and verify the authenticity. Sometimes in recent vintage examples, the multiplier can be anywhere between 3x to, in some cases, over 50 times the actual value of something that if it's unsigned. So the auto is very important. There's also been other scandals too in the industry. I think Paul could probably speak to this as well, where, for instance, with Luka Doncic, right, there are some of Luka's best cards which sell well into the six figures, if not even occasionally into the seven figures. There's rumors that his autographs were not actually signed by Luka; they were signed by Luka's mom, right? So there's all these interesting data points and cases within the sports collectibles market. Obviously, if you can verify, tried and true that something is signed by the athlete, then the value creation in that card could be quite significant and extraordinary at times.
I was going to say, I mean, at least for small claims, Paul, the only issue with it being small claims, yes, it's fast, but it's fast because you don't have the normal discovery mechanisms, depositions, sworn affidavits. So you might get a rushed hearing and maybe even, right? Have they put an answer into this, Paul, Upper Deck?
Not yet. I checked today, and no, it's still just got the initial filings that are
because
there.
maybe if we're going to get some advanced sports lawyer strategy, maybe even it's worthy to take a default there. Just right, you owe how much you owe? $5,000. That's the cap of small claims court. $5,000, $10,000, depending on your jurisdiction. I don't know. You're better to do that than to reveal secrets behind the industry and the potential exposure you have beyond that. But yeah, I'm surprised they only filed in small claims court. Maybe, I don't know. It's probably cheaper to file there, but you're not going to get the answers you want.
I mean, I think that's, I think a lot of it is, this card falls and, right now I was a defense attorney for a while, but now I'm a plaintiff's attorney. And there's just dollar values of cases that as a plaintiff's attorney just don't make sense. And really in that $5,000 to $10,000 range, it's really difficult to get an attorney to take your case. So small claims court, you can take it yourself. You can, it's the great equalizer. It'd be you versus an entire company taking it on yourself. If you think you can do it, do it. And small claims court's a little crazy. It's unexpected outcomes sometimes. And, if he wins, gets the default and gets, the money, there's a successful strategy for him.
You left out my favorite word, though, kangaroo court. There is no rules in small claims court. Literally anything goes. Let's stick here. Ezra, I think maybe we'll lean on you for this. There's a story that we covered last year on our show with the help of Darren Ravel, who's in the sports collectible space, but a case that I think, it didn't actually happen, but I do find it to be very interesting and maybe more up your alley. So as we sit here, we're recording this on November 15th. Tom Brady's an active NFL player, still throwing touchdowns. But at the end of last year, right around March, Tom Brady's, quote, last, close quote, touchdown ball was sold for $518,000. So I remember speaking to Darren at the time. I helped him write a piece for the Action Network, and I was explaining, listen, last is what it is. As long as it's not false advertising, there is some level of the assumption of the risk, right, Paul? When you're speaking about, hey, you're buying a card with Tom Brady's autograph on it. It's not certified by PSA. I think you probably have some degree of reliability that Upper Deck has certified it, right? Maybe you have some idea of that. But when it comes to Tom Brady's last touchdown ball, right, or in theory, Michael Jordan's last, shorts he ever wore with. And then he goes to play for the Wizards. That's a certain level of reliability that's beyond the control of the person putting it up for auction and obviously the house. So Ezra, I'll give it to you. Let's see. Let's say we were in that fun world of March 14th of 2022 when Tom Brady's last touchdown ball had been sold. I don't think the check had cleared. So the buyer was kind of in the middle space there. But How is that situation dealt with? Like, if you're in the eye of the storm there, like, what goes on? I'm so curious of these issues here.
This was a fascinating case and probably one of the strangest sports memorabilia stories you'll hear in a very long time. So what happened was Tom Brady last year, he threw a touchdown in the playoffs last year. It was caught by Mike Evans. And after the Bucs had been defeated, that ball was said to be Tom Brady's last career touchdown pass, right? Mike Evans threw it into the stands. It was collected and caught by a fan. The fan then turned around and went to Leland's auction house, a pretty prominent sports collectibles auction house, and put it up for auction. Right, this ball, and still at this time, Brady had not announced that he was coming back out of retirement. So this was marketed as Tom Brady's last career touchdown ball. The ball was auctioned off. It fetched over $500,000, over $500,000. Great number for the seller. About 24 hours, if not sooner, after the sale had taken place, or at least the hammer had come down on the auction, Tom Brady took to Twitter and said, nope, you know what? I'm actually coming back for another season, right? So this went from being, the final touchdown ball to perhaps not the final touchdown ball. It was still unclear at that time if Brady would actually go through with coming out of retirement. I don't believe he had a signed contract yet. No one knew if he was actually going to go through with it or what team he was going to play for, but it was speculation that Tom Brady was coming back. So it left all parties, the auction house, the buyer, and the consignor in a difficult position. All right, so this was heavily scrutinized, everything from how the ball was marketed. Was it improperly marketed? Was it properly marketed? What terms were being used? What were the terms and conditions of the sale? Would the buyer still want it at a certain price? There were all these open-ended questions. And what transpired was actually a pretty prolonged period of silence. I remember during this point where people were offering suggestions to Mike Hefner, who's the president of Leland's. He's, for full disclosure, Mike Hefner happens to be a special advisor to Collectable. I've got a great relationship. And, what I can say about Leland's is, I thought the way they handled this was, with the utmost integrity. They really involved both the buyer and the seller in it. And essentially after a prolonged period of time, probably a couple months, once it became clear that Tom Brady was actually coming out of retirement, there was a mutual agreement, as the public record, that both the consignor and the buyer agreed to scrap the sale, given the fact that it was such extraordinary circumstances in such a short period of time. So the sale was effectively nullified, and then the ball was given to Leland's auction house to relist in a recent auction. And that ball actually sold for, I don't know the exact numbers, but I think something like $130,000. So it still sold for a pretty healthy number, given the fact that it wasn't actually his final ball, and there's nothing particularly special about it. But I think one thing about collectibles and sports collectibles is sometimes the publicity around an item is a source of value for that item, right? So this is the ball that was widely discussed, in pretty much every mainstream sports and national media outlet. And so I think, just it being that controversy, that ball that was, the subject of the controversy, probably actually wound up adding a significant amount of value once it was resold recently than it perhaps would have been had it just been a ball that was caught in the divisional playoffs in 2022 in a game that the Bucs wound up losing. So really interesting story, and I'll give a lot of credit to Mike Hefner and Leland. I thought the way they handled it, the class that both the consignor and the buyer showed, I thought it was actually one of the better examples of the sports collectibles world, and that there actually can be some humanity in it when all is said and done.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It really is because, every time I get with a client before we file a lawsuit, the thing I tell them is litigation sucks. It's awful. It's horrible. It's not going to work out the way you think it's going to go. You're going to have ups and downs. It's a roller coaster. So when you see people who are, this is an unpredictable outcome, to get together and make a decision rather than having a jury or a judge make a decision for them. It's really good to see. But it's one that, that being said, I wanted the chaos. I wanted a lawsuit. I wanted a jury to decide this because there were so many issues that are there. Because yes, these people that are buying any item at this price, they know, someone can come out of retirement at any time, and this is just the latest of the last ball. So it would have been really neat to see a jury rule and see, what happens here, and actually, set the law for everybody else for the future.
Ezra, I have an actual question here. I don't know this has ever been answered, right? I get that it's good for Leland and it helps, increase their visibility, but like, if I'm the seller of that ball, the valuation of that ball just went from 518 to like $100,000. Aren't I like, don't I have a right to be upset? Don't I have any cause of action here? Right? Like, how did the seller sign off on that? That seems to be a very large loss.
Yeah, look, you've got a right to be upset for sure, right? Because on paper you theoretically lost $400,000. On the flip side, your cost basis of this ball is zero, right? So anything above zero is embedded profit, of course. But yeah, I mean, look, I'm sure it was not a particularly satisfying outcome for the seller to think you got 500 grand and ultimately to wind up with 130 grand. One also key fact here is that I think it might have been a different story had the payment already been processed on the ball, right? The speed with which Tom Brady's announcement came following the hammer price on the auction, I think played a pretty significant part. So, for context, when you buy something at auction, you don't make an immediate payment right then and there. Right? Typically, an auction house gives you anywhere between 2 weeks to maybe 2 to 3 months. And oftentimes there can be credit extended to buyers of items at that altitude, right? So, this happened so swiftly after the hammer price that no dollars had been exchanged. The money wasn't in escrow. It was a pretty clean transaction or lack of a transaction at that point. But still, yeah, look, if you're the seller and you think you sold it for $500,000, you did nothing wrong, right? So I could certainly see how the seller wasn't overly pleased, but still, I think in light of what the ball is and its cultural and historical significance at this point, I think 130 grand or whatever it sold for is still a pretty healthy number for that ball.
Oh, I remember at the time on Twitter, people were saying that the buyer, the guy that bought it for 518, he's probably going to get divorced very quickly after that type of investment. But what we have learned is that probably the seller had to give up on 400 grand. So listen, in a little bit of a divorce switcheroo, that's the guy who ends up in hot water. So speaking of being in hot water, I remember the Aaron Judge chase for 62, the 61st home run ball, I think was caught by a Blue Jays bullpen guy and one of the coaches whose wife was on ESPN, and she joked, hey, before you give the ball back to Judge, like you might want to consult with a divorce attorney here. So, Ezra, I think this is where our last one goes. I have not really heard much about the Judge 62nd home run ball. I've not really heard a peep about it. 60th home run ball, we spent a lot of time on our podcast talking about it, that, speaking about the timing of certain things, right? You talk about the Tom Brady, the timing of that sale, the actual payment being made. If there was like an instantaneous transaction, I think it would have been a little bit more difficult. With respect to the Judge 60th home run ball, or 61st or 62nd, there's certainly no requirement to give the ball to the player the same night the ball is caught. I'm a very big proponent of sleep on it, at least maybe sleep on it once or twice or 3 times. 60th home run ball, we had kind of a Papa v. Hayashi. Paul, I know you know that case well from property law, but a scenario where no one really had possession. You had a dog pile emerge for the 60th ball, and a young Yankees fan emerged with the ball, gives the ball to Judge for, I think it was like 4 signed balls and a bat. Not sure of the ROI on that. 61st home run ball was actually hit in the Toronto Stadium. The bullpen coach for the team catches it for the Blue Jays. I don't know. We'll speed by this, but I guess there is no obligation as an employee of Major League Baseball to give that ball back to the other team. The Blue Jays did that on their own right. Now, Ezra, where I want to leave this for you, 62nd home run ball, caught by a Rangers fan, hit in Texas Stadium, Ranger Stadium. That ball, I have not heard anything about this. So in your space, obviously, you're very heavily involved with, the valuation of those balls, how those balls get put up and sold. So I'd love to, again, put you kind of in the eye of this. Like, what is going on with that ball right now? How quickly are we going to see it? The appraisals, how close are we? I've heard anything between 2 and 5 million. I think that's very interesting. Obviously, a lot of lawyers are interested in that as well.
Yeah, really interesting story. And to be candid, I'm surprised this ball has not surfaced or been sold yet. In collectibles, you want to capitalize on the moment. You want to capitalize on the hype, and you want to sell into that hype as best as you can, right? So, in my professional opinion, I think the seller would have done the best had he sold the ball as quick to that home run actually being realized, right? You cut to now, he had an offer, I think, as of my understanding from JP Cohen from Memory Lane, who extended a $2 million offer on that ball. My understanding is that offer is still a good offer and that he actually would pay $2 million for that ball. But even still, right? I mean, I think now that the Yankees got knocked out of the playoffs, the Astros unfortunately won again.
Judge might not sign with the Yankees.
Judge might not sign with the Yankees. Judge had a pretty difficult postseason. Some of the hype, I think at least, from the ravenous Yankee wealthy affluent collector base has worn off a little bit. I think if Judge does not sign with the Yankees, I think that takes a little bit more air out of that as well. So. In my professional opinion, had it been my ball, I would have looked to sell it as quickly as humanly possible. I would have tried to do, an auction shortly thereafter, if not, within 24 hours of that moment being realized. That typically is when you realize the best prices. For context, I mean, there is precedence for balls going, of a similar magnitude. You had, back in the scandal with McGuire, his home run ball fetched $3 million. Barry Bonds sold for, I think a little under 800 grand. That was a little bit of a steroid tainted era, and his legacy is a little steroid tainted as well. You have other balls, for instance, Collectable. Our company has fractionalized the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar ball, his record ball, when he scored his final NBA regular season point, a record that will probably be surpassed by LeBron James in the next couple of months. And that brought anywhere between $300,000 to $400,000. So, I think here, the reason why this ball is probably going for as much as being appraised as is a confluence of factors. It's the Yankees, right? Yankees tend to bring out the best in prices. It's New York. It's under the bright lights. The amount of media attention and media exposure that Aaron Judge was experiencing during this. So there's a confluence of factors. Judge is very well liked. He's very polished. He's very pristine. There's no fears around steroids with him. So am I surprised by the $2 million number? I'm not terribly surprised, but I do think the longer this sits and the more air that comes out, if Judge is no longer a Yankee and the more time that passes, I don't think it helps its value. I think if anything, it'll put a little downward pressure on the price.
No real legal issues with it. So sell it. Don't hold on to it.
This is why you kind of need someone that's on the legal side, on the sports side. I mean, like from I don't know, again, I read a lot of the Twitter replies, like Judge 60-second home run ball, let's address the elephant in the room. It is not 73, it's not 70, it's not 66. That the value of that ball certainly had a lot to do with the Yankees fans. And if Judge leaves the Yankees, which I'm seeing the same rumors everyone else is, between the Giants and the Dodgers and all these other West Coast teams or big market, I don't want to say big market because I don't offend Yankees fans, but like the team that wants to spend on Judge, right? You're losing that. Again, just from doing some internet sleuthing, which Ezra and Paul, I'm sure you're aware of, the guy that caught the 60-second home run ball made a calculated decision. He's married to a former Bachelor contestant, which I'm not sure is that relevant to the analysis. But then again, you watch the guy's social media feed in the last, in the week right after he caught the ball, and they were traveling with the ball, doing things with the ball. And I'm like, why don't you sell the ball? How about that? How about the little bit of a cachet you got from the week of being the guy that caught the ball? Probably could have sold it. So yeah, we'll see what comes of it. Paul, as you know, we have a fiduciary duty as lawyers to give the right advice. And you don't have to be a lawyer necessarily to have a fiduciary duty. So I hope someone advised him the correct way, but we shall see. So yeah, Paul, Ezra, anything that we did not hit in the memorabilia world that we should be covering?
It's a crazy world and there's always things happening. So we didn't touch on it today. I'm sure it'll pop up next week.
Yeah, right. I think from Collectable standpoint, Collectable is an SEC regulated platform, which does deal in high value collectibles. And I think one thing that I think Dan and Paul both agree is that this is a pretty unregulated industry for the most part, which oftentimes can present some really interesting cases like the ones we've discussed. But I do think over the next coming years, especially as the collectibles industry gains more and more mainstream prominence and attracts an institutional quality investor, I do think you're going to see a lot more regulation and a lot more transparency come into the space. And so while it might not be good for small claims courts and for legal excitement from that standpoint, I do think it is something that the industry needs, and I think something that ultimately collectors will welcome.
All good. Paul, Ezra, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Dan.
So again, that was Ezra Levine and Paul Lesko, a really fantastic conversation. We definitely got into the weeds. Mike, got to ask you this. Ezra with some really interesting advice. So the Aaron Judge ball, we have not heard anything about this ball for like a month. Obviously, Ezra's advice would have been to have sold that ball really quickly because, the Yankees obviously got bounced from the postseason. Judge didn't play that well. And Judge also maybe possibly won't be a member of the New York Yankees in a little bit. You like my voice there, Mike? And assuming that happens, that ball is worth a lot less if Judge is no longer a member of the Yankees. Mike, do you agree with that hypothesis? That is Ezra's hypothesis.
Only in the context of probably a Yankee fan would overpay for that ball.
If he was a Yankee for life.
Right. If he signs with the Yankees, he stays with the Yankees, right? The person who would buy that piece of memorabilia most likely would be a Yankee fan, and they would be overpaying for the true value of that ball.
And if Judge now, right, I don't know what the odds are. Actually, I'll give it to you. You're a Yankee fan. You're a diehard Yankee fan. What are the odds that Judge remains with the team?
In terms of percentages?
Yeah. You say it's in the ballpark of 50-50 or more like 90-10?
I would probably put it in the ballpark of like 80% he stays with the team. I think there would need to be a significant amount of money that's thrown at him for him to leave. I have to imagine the Yankees are going to probably match most of the offers. So it has to be something that's just unbelievably way overvalued. And he's like, I just can't pass up on this.
Okay, Mike, so let's assume it's 80-20. I think that's totally fair. By holding on to the ball for this long, and again, we are now months since this ball has been hit, it's a really big risk to take. And I think you are 100% right, Mike. I think a Yankee fan would have overpaid for this ball, assuming that he had remained a Yankee and remained a Yankee for life. Whatever contract Judge signs now, he might truly retire as a Yankee. But if he goes and he signs with the Dodgers, right? I don't know how many Yankee fans are paying for the Aaron Judge home run ball when he's now a Dodger. He's now a Giant. So that's a massive amount of risk. And I don't think the ball will have gone up in value in like 3 months. It was probably worth more right away. So I'm not sure what advice this guy, out in Texas, the Ranger fan that caught this ball, I'm not sure who's giving him the advice, but I don't know, Mike. I think there's something to Ezra's advice here. I think he probably would have been better off going to market immediately.
Probably just for the hype. But I mean, there was also the issue of the reason he probably should have sold it right away was the fact that he potentially could have hit another one, right? So then the immediate depreciation because he just has the second to last home run that he hit of the American League record, right? So I don't know if it's that significant of a depreciation in value. If he leaves the team, maybe, but in terms of right now, I think the value might stand with the ball. I don't find the hype causes potential appreciation of the ball and increase in that value, but I don't know. It probably still stands the true value.
I mean, we'll see. We'll see how our Rangers fan is feeling at the end of all this. Now, speaking of things that might have wild fluctuations in value. If anybody has been following the news this past week, big headlines in the sports crypto world with FTX Arena getting their name pulled off of the Miami Heat Arena in the NBA world. Okay, so FTX, Mike, as you have explained to me, I guess you can be a resident crypto guy on this podcast. That is a crypto exchange where you can buy and sell cryptocurrencies, and FTX has made a lot of waves. I know there's been some reports that they were giving out $500 to everybody in a particular section of Miami Heat games. They're throwing around money left and right. It's the future of sports partnerships until that bubble pops. So, Mike, we're talking about wild fluctuations in value. FTX is now no longer the name partner on the stadium, pulled their deal from Brady. A lot of issues in the sports crypto space. So before we kick it to our guests, Mike DiLiello and Duncan Hubbard, Mike, again, you're a sports crypto guy. I'll give you that title. What do you think of the landscape as we sit here today? It seems a little tepid, a little frisky.
Well, yeah, I mean, FTX, the value of the founder of the company went from, I think, 18 billion to 1 billion in like a couple of days, and then now it's defunct completely. He went to zero. So it's crazy. And we mentioned it with OBJ and the OBJ's involvement with crypto and things like that. But it's not just him. I mean, you've got Steph Curry that's involved. You've got Tom Brady that's involved. Obviously, you have the naming rights at FTX Stadium that was impacted here. We've got other stadiums like crypto.com and things like that. So this is a area of finance that has just kind of took the world by storm during the pandemic, and everyone always cautioned of the volatility of the market.
People may be cautioned, maybe other people didn't listen to it. So I guess, we're going to talk all things sports crypto. The other topic we brought up with them, those guys, and we're going to talk about in the show, they wrote an article about eminent domain, this interesting saga with Niagara University. I love the title of their article, the Battle of Niagara. It's a fun way to make sports eminent domain sounds interesting. But yeah, it's a topic, Mike, obviously we've never covered on our show with respect to eminent domain. And for people that don't know, I don't know if we did such a great job breaking down like the finite pieces of it, but there's two concepts of in law school that I had not really heard about that just kind of like shocked me. First, I don't know if there'll ever be a sports adverse possession case, but there's this concept in law school called adverse possession that, like, if you leave, like you own like 4 or 5 properties around the country, and you're like, vacationing in like Venice and you're all over the place, and you leave your house as like unattended for years. You're just like living up in Venice. That someone can move into your house, open, notorious, hostile, all these fun things, and they can actually get legal right to live in your house. That's something called adverse possession. Kind of blew my mind that like there was a real thing called squatters' rights. Someone could squat in your house and they could legally take possession of it if they did it for a certain amount of time. So that was number one concept in law school that really shocked me. Number two was eminent domain. Eminent domain is this bizarre concept that if the government wants to take something from you, they can. And they just have to pay just compensation. It has to be for some form of a public use. And as long as they pay you a reasonable amount of money, there's really not much you can do about it. So I always found that topic to be interesting. And there haven't really been that many sports eminent domain cases that have come across my radar. So what we have here, we got tipped off to an interesting battle that's going on over in Niagara between the university and kind of a private developer over control of this piece of land. So we thought we'd bring two guys on that wrote the article to kind of break it down. It's certainly an interesting story, and those two our two friends over there volunteered to kind of write this out and explain the world of eminent domain and really what eminent domain is. So again, I don't know, it was my second topic in law school that really kind of spoke to me. I'm like, wow, this is, they created rules for the government to really just steal plots of land from the private. This sounds wholly unfair. And yes, you can say that we're using it for a sports use to create an arena, but the process of like the government stealing your private land, it just doesn't sit well with me. But that's just me, Mike. Maybe I'm old school. I don't love the government taking our land. That sounds very odd.
Well, the biggest sports one involved with that, huh?
Oh, I don't. Go ahead, tell me.
The Brooklyn Nets. So
that was eminent domain, Mike?
That was eminent domain. And there was an issue where there was a holdout and there was one person, I believe it was one man, who lived in an apartment complex. So in Brooklyn, where they built where the Brooklyn Nets stadium now sits, the Barclays Center, they used eminent domain to take out a lot of housing, a lot. Like there was a significant amount of residents, apartment complexes there. And there was one particular, I believe it was a man who was there, who had been there for years and years and years and refused to leave and almost blew up the entire deal of this stadium being built there. And there's a case about it. And I can't remember. I remember learning about it in law school, but it's a very interesting area. And that's where the Brooklyn Nets sit now.
And that's why they have a cursed franchise with all of their players threatening to blow up the team simultaneously. We figured it out, Mike. I did not know that. Shout out to you, Mike. Now I have some homework to do. So without further ado, Mike, let us kick it over to our guests for our conversation on eminent domain and sports cryptocurrency, the only podcast that could have guests that cover such wide-ranging topics. Mike DiLiello and Duncan Hubbard.
So we are going to now delve into some other topics that we don't normally talk about on the show. We're going to talk about some eminent domain, yes, eminent domain in sports, and we are also going to talk about maybe the sports crypto bubble, which is in the midst of popping as we speak, for better or for worse. Okay, so let us start with this. There's an interesting topic that kind of came across my radar, of all places, in Niagara University. We're talking about eminent domain, potentially for use as a sports facility. I know a little bit about this, but Mike, Duncan, you just put a piece out for the website. So, Mike, why don't you give us the lay of the land, and then, Duncan, I'm sure you can help fill in the gaps.
Yeah, so currently there's a ongoing battle over land downtown that's been slated for development by a private company and the city of Niagara and its mayor, Robert Resitano. The city is basically trying to initiate eminent domain proceedings with the proposed project of building an arena under a sort of municipality-owned lease concept where the Niagara University basketball and hockey teams would fill that arena, with the idea being that that is a more beneficial public purpose to the city than the currently slated development project. Now, besides the actual intricacies of that specific issue as to whether or not the project is financially viable, whether it's more viable than what it currently is slated to be developed into, it does raise interesting questions about whether or not there is a world where a municipality may initiate eminent domain proceedings for a sports-specific purpose.
Yeah, and on that, I think it's obviously going to be their burden to prove the public purpose. I mean, if both options are operating at a net loss, then how do you justify to the taxpayers that building a stadium for even to sport use is better than the big data center that's being proposed.
The question I have for both of you guys, I mean, I guess when it comes down to eminent domain, right, to some extent, at least what we remember from law school, eminent domain certainly does not come up in my practice a lot. But, right, if a governmental entity, municipality is going to take something, right, don't they have to be putting it to a true, fair use, right? In your research and writing this article, which again is now up in the site, Sports Eminent Domain and the Battle of Niagara, like, I don't know, is use of a sports facility, is that fair use under eminent domain? I mean, I imagine there's got to be some line there. What came up in your research?
Researching case law, especially through mostly Supreme Court cases that have been pretty authoritative on this topic, even down to city municipalities, it's clear that the courts have generally deferred to legislatures on what they consider a public purpose. Now, not only does that mean that the legislature, as long as they go through the proper proceedings, can determine that there is a viable public purpose, whether or not it may seem on its face that that is the case. But I think also there's, which I don't know whether or not it's common knowledge, but a municipality can then take that property, transfer it to a third party for development, effectively going from a private company to another private company or private entity that owns the land. And that's still considered a legitimate public purpose as long as the end result of what the land does or occupies serves that public purpose that they, started in determining. So it's interesting that that legislatures on the whole are given a sort of not free rein, but a greater deference by the courts to determine both what that public purpose is, whether it's valid, and who actually finishes the project to fulfillment.
So I'll give you a hypothetical, and it's not really a hypothetical because it's going on in the town I grew up in right now, but there is a ongoing dispute about a golf course, a private golf course that was owned by a private country club. And the town, people can look this up, but it's where I live in, where I grew up in Westchester County, in New York. But the town essentially commandeered that golf course and said, we want to use it for public use. So I have this like $1 million question, right? Like, what kind of town needs a golf course? Public use, I mean, maybe that's where the case law comes out. But Mike, to your point, I think you hit the nail on the head. There's a lot of deference given to public use. But the question is really like, should that be the case? What, does a town really need a golf course with respect to Niagara, right? Yes, maybe you want to purchase this land, but you really have the infrastructure to build out an arena on that particular plot of land. Do you need this plot of land for a basketball course? So, Duncan, I guess I'll turn it to you. I mean, you guys did a great job in this article, just kind of laying it out. But I don't know, when it comes to eminent domain, like I'm not sure in what world, like a municipality needs a golf course, needs a basketball court. I mean, that maybe should be the standard, but I guess that's in your research, that's not what the courts are looking at.
Right. Yeah, no, to your point, like in terms of need, you can, of course, create the justification defense that's going to create jobs to construct and build. People are going to use the tolls and the roads to go to the course or the basketball arena. But I'm not sure if it truly lives up to the need that, another option that was offering long-term sustainable jobs past just the fans that attend an arena.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how much more there is here. I mean, I find it to be very fun. Like it's what is needed for a public purpose. So I know on both sides of this equation, and people that are from the upstate area, I'm sure. I mean, I know I've spoken to some people associated with this case. It's very heated. But the question is, what is more beneficial for the public, right? A data privacy center that could create a lot of jobs, or a sports facility. And if you're weighing both of those, maybe both serve a public purpose in some way, shape, or form. I don't know. I don't want to get off the topic too quick. Mike, Duncan, anything about this interesting dispute over in Niagara, eminent domain, that we have not discussed?
Part of what I was surprised by is not just that, there's sort of deference given to the legislatures on the whole of how easy, sort of it is to create a public purpose and then initiate eminent domain proceedings. And as long as you're sort of in the ballpark, not to obviously use a really terrible pun here, but you can sort of get away with it as a municipality. But I think this does, in socializing this concept to some of my law school classmates, I think it does raise a lot of policy arguments that are not economic, because we tend, when we talk about stadiums and we talk about these new projects that are happening, the economics come into focus with public taxpayer dollars versus private investment, and whether it's a lease or own project, and all of those, economic considerations in building a stadium. But I think in an eminent domain specific case, when you talk about where the land is and what the current purpose is and whether or not that would disproportionately affect lower income communities and how that affects the taxpayers and residents currently there, there's a lot deeper consideration that has to happen from a public policy perspective than I think probably anyone would think of, at first glance.
I don't know that much more there is. I mean, at the end of the day, right, I think your understanding, and again, you guys did a fantastic job with the article. It seems like the courts want to give deference to municipality to really do whatever they want, even as is the case, it seems to be here, and people can look up further. There's other reporting out there on this Niagara dispute. But even if, it takes some leaps of faith that Niagara actually has the money to actually have a well-funded stadium, that somehow doesn't really matter in the analysis, as long as they have a good faith basis for pulling it off. That seems to be enough. So I'm not sure I'm necessarily okay with that, but I am aware that seems to be the prevailing case law. So maybe it's going to take some case like this where there seems to be some clear evidence of underfunding to maybe change the par. So, we'll keep tabs on that case. I think it's an interesting one, and one that popped on my radar because we have never covered eminent domain on the show. We've covered a lot of things. Speaking of municipalities getting involved with things that they might not have, maybe should not have done, let us move over to the world of sports and cryptocurrency. So a lot of headlines this past week. I was keyed up maybe, I don't know, a couple weeks back that this could be in the works, but FTX, Duncan, I'm gonna let you explain this, but FTX Arena was the Miami Heat's partner for a period of time until FTX has to pull out of that deal. I know Tom Brady had some association with them. Talked about a number of deals. You could talk about Odell Beckham. We could talk about Cade Cunningham. But let's start with FTX. I think that's, really that popped on people's radars for the first time. So Duncan, kind of give us the lay of the land, what's going on with FTX, the deal they signed with the Miami Heat, and the ripple effects being seen throughout the sports crypto industry.
Right. Yeah. So last March, the Heat and FTX inked a 19-year, $135 million deal, obviously with SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, and FTX filing for bankruptcy on Friday. The Miami Heat released a joint statement with Miami-Dade County expressing their disappointment and really looking to get out of the deal. And then they ended up getting out of the deal 1 year into the 19-year deal. From what I've heard, they've already erased really any sign of FTX, barring one banner at the stadium. I think it's people are already comparing the situation to Enron, and it's funny, especially when you consider that the Astros had Enron Field before Minute Maid Field. So I think it just goes out to kind of precaution, if you will, of what kind of brand you want to associate yourself with.
At a certain point, right? I don't know, the money is very big. Old Takes Exposed had some fun this past week with some old tweets that sports crypto is changing the game. This will be a game changer. I'm looking at, this giant deal that was signed by FTX. And in theory, it kind of is a game changer, right? The year one, I think it's a $14 million payment that FTX had to make to the Miami Heat. I think it's $14 million total. And then $5.5 million, you keep going. It's like $5.5 million for the next 3 years, then $6 million, then $6.5 million, then $7.5 million, $8.5 million, and $8 million. Obviously, it's a lot of money. This huge 19-year contract supposed to run through 2040. And now FTX is Duncan, they have nobody now? They're not sponsored by anybody?
No, I think from what I've seen, everyone's pulled out, rightfully so. I don't know if you necessarily want to be associated with that, especially if criminal charges end up getting filed for SBF and more under the table dealings, if you will, come out. So I'm not really sure anyone would want to be associated with that.
So Duncan, you mentioned this character, SBF. Reddit had this big thread out on, he's on the cover of Forbes. It was the Forbes 400. And then a couple of years prior, I think Elizabeth Holmes, who people will know from the documentary, the Theranos documentary, whatever nonsense. But we kind of put these people up on a pedestal, and maybe Theranos a little bit different. But with respect to crypto, we've known for a while, right, that the valuations in crypto are going to wildly fluctuate. So maybe again, you guys know I make this joke a lot online, but maybe some level of assumption of the risk that we are naming a stadium the FTX Arena. And that value is going to fluctuate tremendously, the actual business that they're in. So I don't know if you could feel that bad for the Miami Heat. And also, we didn't talk about Tom Brady has his own deal, with FTX, and now they also separately have to pull out as a sponsor. Duncan, Mike, I'll turn this to you kind of at large. What does this say about the nature of the business of sports cryptocurrency? I mean, obviously, it's just one company. It's not all companies, but we talk about the Crypt, right? Crypto.com did their separate deal with the Lakers Arena. What do we think this says about the future of endorsements, sponsorships between sports and crypto?
Right. Yeah, no, I think on the crypto.com note, I wouldn't be surprised if the Lakers check in or maybe restructure their long-term deal with crypto.com. I mean, you talked about Cade Cunningham earlier. He signed a deal with BlockFi to get 100% of his signing bonus in Bitcoin, and it ended up failing. Same with Odell Beckham. I think it just goes a precautionary tale to kind of do your own due diligence before diving headfirst into crypto.
Yeah, I would say that applies to any emerging market, and especially one that's an emerging market of currency. It's interesting, there maybe because the Miami Heat arena is a publicly owned arena. It's owned by Miami-Dade County mostly. So it's interesting to see how much or whether or not they did a substantial amount of underwriting and whether or not the risk here was articulated to the county in what ultimately ended up happening. I mean, there's sort of an obvious risk, like you said, Dan, and that the county would have had to assume with a relatively new company. And they do have an out here that still guarantees them $16.5 million if FTX faces an insolvency event like they are currently. It's a cautionary tale that they probably should have learned from Enron Field in Houston, that they didn't necessarily take to heart. And now they're out a significant amount of money.
Duncan, there's one that you kind of alerted me to. I mean, obviously we could talk about Odell Beckham, who, I mean, I heard this crazy story. Maybe Duncan, you have some insight on this, but that the way that Odell Beckham structured his deal that was, I guess, immediately converted to crypto, I think he paid taxes on the higher figure, which was like closer to 700,000. And because of the fluctuations in crypto, that actual 700,000 is now worth closer to 100,000. So the value of his deal has obviously gone down if he converted the entire thing to crypto. But separately, I think he's already paid taxes on the first 700. So like I saw some crazy report that he's actually like he lost money by playing in the league last year. Did you see the same thing?
Right, yeah. And you could attribute maybe some of that to the California tax rate, of course. But yeah, when he signed his 1-year deal with the Rams, $750,000 deal, and Bitcoin was at 62,000. And then as of recently, it was at 19,000. So that combined with the tax rate, it just seems like another precautionary tale. Why not to dive headfirst into crypto?
I'll give you another one. I mean, you sent it to me, so this is your own. But you reminded me. Cade Cunningham signed a deal with a company called BlockFi last year and received 100% of his signing bonus in Bitcoin. This is courtesy of our friends at Front Office Sports. BlockFi is now preparing to file for bankruptcy. So yeah, I guess there was a movement. I remember this last year that it was you sounded very hip and very cool to convert your salary and your signing bonus into crypto or into Bitcoin. But like, I don't know. At some point, sometimes it pays to just take the conservative investment. Like, yes, maybe if Bitcoin did really well, you could have made a lot of money, but you also make a lot of money by converting the money into the stock market. Obviously, stock market has not been doing well recently, getting crushed, as is Bitcoin and the whole crypto market. But sometimes there's a danger, right? You want to be associated with being this hip and cool brand for partnership purposes, but it comes with some level of a risk. If you're, if the reporting is true that Odell Beckham lost money by playing football, right? He would have been better off sitting on his couch. I mean, that's pretty bad. And as we sit here today on November 15th, Odell Beckham has not yet signed. I imagine maybe that's the reason why he's kind of rushing himself back from that bad injury he had in the Super Bowl, because the guy lost money last year. And maybe the reason also why he's suing Nike, possibly, maybe. I don't know. Duncan, Mike, any other thoughts on this crypto side? I mean, I find it to be very fascinating.
The only thing I would say is it's pretty sound financial advice beyond crypto or any sort of emerging market, just to not put your eggs in one basket. And really that's not an issue when everything's going up, but when certain things are going down less than others, you at least cover some of the losses that you would have otherwise taken. So, I mean, it does go back to who's in the ear of some of these athletes when, they're getting advice, not just, we as, aspiring legal professionals and legal professionals are part of their counseling team, but they have financial people that are obviously not giving them good information if, they're not telling them to at least think about the idea of diversifying.
You'd hope that they're giving them all the options, but, obviously athletes' careers are short for, sometimes it's good to be very risky. A guy like Cade Cunningham, he's going to have a long and successful career. He can make it up. But if you're a guy like Odell Beckham, we're now past, week 10 of the season, you haven't signed with anybody. Maybe that wasn't the smartest move. So it's just my 2 cents. Mike, Duncan, you've done an excellent job. Everybody check out their article up now on conductdetrimental.com. Sports Eminent Domain and the Battle of Niagara. Guys, great job. And obviously stay tuned for maybe some more updates on the crypto space. I have a sense that we're going to be getting some more stuff soon. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Mike DiLiello is a 1L over at UNC Law, and Duncan Hubbard is a 2L at Miami Law. Excellent job by both of those guys. Certainly some fascinating topics. And again, we have really, really spanned the entire sports gambit. Mike, listen, we talk about like risky investments. My only issue with this is like, as long as the players are aware that Bitcoin, like converting your entire salary, which is like cash, right? It's money, right? You can put in a lot of safe investments, as long as the players know that this is a very risky investment. And as long as they, with free will, subscribe to investment, there's nothing wrong with it. Well, speaking of sponsors, Mike, I am on Friday going to the lovely state of Nebraska. Our podcast, as you know, is sponsored by OHF Law or Horgan and Flungy. We talk a lot of things college sports, so we're giving advice on the NIL front. Always, usually, for this, you're going to have financial planners as a college student, financial advisors. Now, for the first time, really, you can do that. Maybe you're going to get that advice through, through someone pretty smart, maybe a lawyer, maybe not. It's all good. But if you're thinking about college sports, college athletes, I want you to think of Horgan and Flungy, our friends over in Nebraska. Mike, I'm going to be doing ESPN Omaha. I'm going to go into the law school. I'm going to a game. We're doing the whole Nebraska gambit. Maybe I'll go to the new weight room that Indomik and Sue just bought for the players. Maybe I'll check the whole thing out. I think, Mike, this is going to be like a VIP access. I think it's going to be like the full, like, legit red carpet treatment for yours truly. This is like a big week in sports law. Okay, Mike. So let us, as we put this episode in the books, we have one more order of business before we officially hit the outro. Mike, our friend Conlan is up and down. He's all excited. He's 7-1-1 in his bets for Bettor Edge. So I told Conlan if he keeps picking winners, he can come on back on the show. So as our last order of business, let us kick it over to Conlan Farrell. I hate that he's doing so well, but I do secretly love it. And his Bettor Edge betting segment.
What's that look on your face, Colin? What's that look mean?
I'm giddy with excitement for being able to deliver once again. So again, you just do my lead in. At this point, I need a proper lead in because listen, this is a king's ransom at this point.
Okay, King Colin. I thought I was one of the hosts of this podcast. I thought you're just the betting picks guy. But listen, if you go 7-1-1, you kind of do get to make the rules. So that's fair. Listen, I'll give you your proper build-up. Okay. King Conlan, king of the Bettor Edge segment. Use our promo code CONDUCT. Get $20 for free by signing up on Bettor Edge, the social betting platform. People, set the lines. Maybe they're right. Maybe they're wrong. But Conlan, you are cleaning up on Bettor Edge. So, Conlan, listen, take your victory lap. What was the pick last week? What was the pick last week?
The pick last week was the Tennessee Titans, Mike Vrabel's group down there in Nashville. Like I said, I put it out on Twitter at Conlan_Farrell, where I said, listen, after the Titans took care of the clown show, is what I called Russell Wilson and Nathaniel Can't Hackett's bunch. Listen, that Broncos are atrocious, and it was a touch and go for a while there. They had an early 7-0 lead, but I never lost faith. The better football team prevailed. So again, another week, another W. It's just at this point, the sun rises in the east. Death taxes. Conlan giving you picks that win on Bettor Edge.
Can I ask you a favor, Conlan?
Sure.
Can you potentially not start a war with our sponsor for the podcast?
Yeah. Well, listen again. These people did not know what they were getting themselves into.
Let me set this up. Conlan, you do your victory lap, which is totally fair on Twitter, right? You go with the Titans taking care of the clown show in Denver. I moved to 7-1-1 on NFL plays given out on the Conduct Detrimental podcast in conjunction with our friends at Bettor Edge. So listen, I know they listen to the show, so I have to get their back a little bit. They basically said congrats to Coleman.
Coleman, yes, that's my alter ego.
Colman. It was a little bit of a typo. And you right, Conlan. Obviously, it was a typo. There are friends at Bettor Edge. Their account was commenting in yours, giving you some engagement. You right. Not sure who Coleman is, but if he's following me, I'll ride with him too. Conlan, we don't start fights with sponsors. Okay?
That's not starting a fight. That's holding them to the same gold winning standard as I'm holding myself when I'm delivering these picks week in and week out. If we can't all be held accountable, then what is this? What are we doing? Okay.
Well, listen, you can get away with a lot of things because you're 7-1-1. But listen, we got to be nice. We got to be nice to Bettor Edge. They're our friends over there. Okay. Greg found us out. It's our good friend. Okay. So
they're good people. They're good people.
If you keep picking winners over here, I'm sure it's going to be okay. 7-1-1. There is absolutely no pressure on you at all to pick another winner. There is none. What do you got to get us to a guaranteed 8-1?
Last night, the Philadelphia Eagles, the last undefeated team in the NFL, fall to division rival Washington. It was a little bit of a disappointment there on Monday Night Football. So now the NFC is kind of anybody's game. And you know who actually won probably the craziest game of the weekend was those Minnesota Vikings, Kirk Cousins. You know what I mean? Kirk Cousins all iced out. He's got the drip now. He's got a little different mojo kicking for him. So that's where I'm going to go. Let me go to Minneapolis, where the Minnesota Vikings play host to the Dallas Cowboys, and you're actually getting the Vikings here on Bettor Edge at +2. And I think that's a crazy spot. The Cowboys lost over the weekend in OT to Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, who are now back in the hunt. So let me go Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, who is just ridiculous. Listen, that team's really well-rounded. They play both sides of the ball, special teams, all very, very capable. So I like the Vikings here at +2 against Dak and Mike McCarthy and them.
Colin, you're kind of breaking my heart because your pick, the Minnesota Vikings, just absolutely ripped the heart out of my Buffalo Bills this past week. I was doing something on Sunday. I'll admit I normally am glued in front of the television from 1 to 4. Sometimes fatherly duty calls. So I was not watching. And I poked my head up. I see 27-23, and I'm like, guess we're good to go. Bills have the ball. And that's it. I wasn't watching the end of the game. I just assumed the game was
Bills
over.
Twitter account even called game, which again, if you call game, I saw somebody from Barstool tweet this, and I completely agree. If you call game as the team official Twitter account and then lose, you should not be allowed to delete the tweet. Elon, that is my only ask of you as the new head chief tweet. Please, that has to stand up. You have to own your failure. Own it and accept it.
That's why, I mean, we have Fred Siegel. He's been on our show before, the Old Takes Exposed guy. His account is full of them. Second time, actually, Fred's come up on the show today. So in any event, Conlon, we'll take it to the window. I have never really been that confident in your abilities, but I kind of have to at this point. 7-1-1, Conlon. You've done a tremendous job. But listen,
let me give you a little bonus right now.
Since we brought bonus pick.
Again, I'm feeling good. The hair's feeling great today. It's flowing. It's cascading down. Give me a little mullet juice, I'll call it. Extra bonus pick. You brought up the Bills. Right now, they're expecting 3 feet of snow in Buffalo on Sunday for that Bills-Browns game. That over right now, still on Bettor Edge. You can grab it at 47.5, the over-under set. Take the under there, 47.5. It's dropped almost everywhere else, but our friends at Bettor Edge are giving you a chance there. They want you to come in and enjoy their wonderful site. So 47.5, I like the under in that one. A little extra juice. This is not an official play. This is what we call
No.
This is what we call a lean. This is what we call a lean.
If you give out picks on the show, it counts, Colin. That counts. If you get both of these right, go to 9-1-1. Otherwise, maybe you go into 7-3. But Conlon, I should correct you on one thing. Just people know Bettor Edge. Again, this is not a site where Bettor Edge is setting the line. It is the community. It's a social betting platform. So if someone feels pretty confident, and I've seen some stats, and necessarily in the weather, yes, sometimes if it's very windy, that will sometimes lead to a lower score, as we saw, we've seen in different events. But with the rain, it's not necessarily a lower score. Sometimes it's a higher score because it's a sloppy, messy game. But we have someone out here that believes that their theory seems to be that the snow is not going to slow down the scoring, which is possible. It's possible, Colin. But
3 feet of snow, though. Imagine, again, the Bills' high-power offense with Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis. Those guys trying to cut and move in 3 feet of snow. I'm sorry. Have you walked in? You're from the East Coast, as am I. You've seen 3 feet of snow. It is not that easy to go out there and just try to run as fast as you can and make cuts and stuff like that.
Listen, Conlon, you feel that confident, right? You were the one trying to make it a bonus pick, a lean, like 1 minute ago. It's an official pick. We can agree on this, correct?
Put it on the board. That's fine. Put it on the board.
Put it on the board. 2 picks this week, Conlon. You've been doing a great job. Keep it going, buddy. I believe in you.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
So that was Conlon Farrell. That'll put this episode in the books. A lot of topics. If you're thinking of sports, you're thinking of law, you should be thinking of conduct detrimental. We would really appreciate if you give our podcast a 5-star review. If you are thinking of someone in the sports law space that should be listening to our podcast, please share it with them. That would be very, very kind of you as we continue to grow our platform to infinity, Mike, and beyond. How about that? Mike, anything to add before we put this episode in the books?
I think this was a step into some nuanced areas of sports law that we haven't really covered before. So definitely an interesting listen all around.
We appreciate you hanging out with us each and every week, and we will see you next time on another episode of Conduct Detrimental.